Hey, this is Clark with Pass the Baton, and I was thinking about spiritual numbness. And the reason I was thinking about it is because I've had trouble with my back off and on for several years, but in the last couple weeks, it got to where it was numbness in my foot. And I always thought that you could just kind of push through the numbness because I'd had little bits and pieces of it before. But what I found out is that when you do that, it actually hurts. It will hurt in your calf and it hurts in different places in your foot. And literally, you can't hardly push through it. It's just an odd feeling. Now, it's not so bad that I can't walk, but it has slowed me down a bit and I've not been able to jog. So today, as I speak to you, or as I'm making this video, I actually had an appointment with the chiropractor. So I do believe it'll get better. But what I was thinking, I've heard so many people say, I'm just numb to it, or they're numb to it. They're spiritually numb, which means basically they don't have any feelings. So I present this thought to you before I get into this lesson about how to prevent spiritual numbness. But if someone is truly spiritual numb, then when they're doing something, it actually hurts. Not only is it hurting them spiritually, but there's something within them, no doubt, that probably does hurt. And probably that they realize that there's something going on and they need to fix it. So, as I was studying this, thinking about that thought, I got into Psalms chapter 42. And I believe as the psalmist writes this, he's not numb, but he's very distressed or depressed, probably spiritually depressed, as he writes this. And we'll go through this, and you just catch a few thoughts as I go through this here in Psalms chapter 42. It says, and I'm reading from the ESV. It says, as the deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night. Now just think of that. Number one, he's dry and he's looking for something to drink, something to eat. So he still has feelings. He's obviously not numb, but he sounds a little bit depressed here as you read through this. He says, but he is longing for God. So no doubt at some point he's probably experienced some closeness with God. And I hope that you have as well. I know I have. And as you see, remembering that is a huge part of getting through this time in your life. But when he says in verse 3, my tears have been my food day and night, just think of really the significance of that, of how distressed or depressed the psalmist is as he writes this. And literally, another thought here is as he's writing this, it's literally addressed to the Maskell of the sons of Korah. So these were the people who were dedicated to sing. This was a psalm, but it was a song. And obviously psalms were meant to be sung, but this is one that he was literally addressing them to sing so that they could use it. So you're obviously when you just read the first three verses, you're like, well, this sounds a little bit depressing so far, but just hang on for just a moment. But he says, my tears have been my food. And then in verse 4, and this is a huge thing. And really, when you think about it, part of preventing spiritual numbness is being willing to talk about it. If you can't talk about it, then you probably are numb. And so you need to talk about it. And the psalmist here is literally, he's okay with saying exactly what's going on in his head. He's okay with talking about it. And maybe you're thinking, well, he's writing this to himself, but obviously he's writing it, understanding that someone will read it, and no doubt under the inspiration of the Spirit of God, he is doing this. But yet the thought behind it is yes, he's writing down his thoughts, his deepest thoughts. But then, and so you got to be willing, first off, you need to be willing to talk about it. Be willing to share your thoughts with someone. Hopefully you have someone in your life that you can sit down and share these deep thoughts with. But he says, these things I remember. So remember. Now, whether you've gone through a huge spiritual place in your life or just remember the benefits and the great things that God has blessed you with, remember it. When you get into that point where you're a little bit depressed, remember what has already happened. Be willing to talk about it. He said, these things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throne and lead them in procession to the house of God. In other words, this guy was excited at one time. He said, with glad shouts and songs of praise, the multitude keeping festival. And then he says this, why are you cast down, O my soul? Now, see, we were taught, and especially as nurses, in nursing school, we were taught a couple of things. Number one, if you talk to yourself, there's an issue, which I'm like, a friend of mine used to say, everyone talks to themselves, but only crazy people let you know that they're talking to themselves. I don't know if that's true, but I just remember a friend of mine saying that. And when this guy, he's not only is he talking to himself, which, as I've said, I think he's probably doing a great thing. He's writing down his innermost thoughts, but not only that, he's asking the question why. And that was another thing in nursing school, psychology class. They said never ask the question why. Phrase your sentence as a what, or something along those lines. Even though we still used to question why all the time. It says, why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? So this phrase is repeated really more than twice. It's twice in chapter 42, and it's repeated again in chapter 43, which I believe in chapter 43, where and some say that these were probably written together at one time. But it's almost like a chorus because he says it, he's going to repeat it. He says, why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? And then he's giving you how he gets through this hope in God. For I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. So he understands all that's going on here, but he says, I will hope in God. So even when he felt like he was at the bottom, even when his tears was his meat day and night, even when he was longing for God, he literally says, I shall praise him. I'm going to hope in him. He says, my soul is cast down within me. Therefore, I remember you from the land of Jordan and Hermon. And so he's given some examples, but he's constantly remembering. He's constantly giving his thought. He's willing to talk about it. He's asking why. He says, my hope, and he's continuing to have this hope. Then he affirms God's love in verse 8 says, by day the Lord commands his steadfast love. So he is remembering it continually remembering it. And I think that anyone that's listening to this, maybe you have faced this or are facing this or someone's facing it. Surely you have something spiritually good that you can remember. I hope and I pray you do. But when it gets down in verse 10, it says, where they're asking him, they said, where's your God? And so, in other words, this implies that something bad has happened to him. When someone's looking at you and says, well, where's your God at in this? Well, obviously, there's something wrong going on in your life, or they wouldn't say, where's God? Or else, if everything was great, they wouldn't even ask the question because it would be inferring something wrong on their end of it. But they're saying, obviously, there's not a God, or he wouldn't let you go through this. So they're asking. So obviously, something has gone on in this individual's life. The psalmist, as he writes this, then he goes into this course again. Why are you cast down? Why are you in turmoil? And he says, hope in God. And that's the crux of it, I guess you could say, is that your hope is in God. And if we look around, if you can look around and just as Paul wrote in Romans that even unbelievers, they should be able to look around and see the creation and believe in God. So surely we can look around and see that, yes, there is a designer. Yes, there's a creator. Yes, there's someone bigger than me and bigger than you that has done this. And that's God. And then, of course, we see the story of Jesus, which I believe makes perfectly good sense. And there's so much evidence to back it up. But he's from beginning of time, he planned after man sinned and he had to make a way of redemption. He sent his son, Jesus Christ, to be that way. And so because of that, we can have hope. Even when we don't understand what's going on, remember, be willing to talk about it. Be willing to ask the question, ask God the questions, but your hope has to be in God. In other words, I started this out and listen, I'm not fighting spiritual depression, but I was having numbness physically in my foot. And because of that, I have prayed about it. I've asked a few people I know to pray about it, but I still was willing to seek medical guidance to a chiropractor. And so my hope is that God will use this person to help my pain, to help my problem. But it always goes back to hope in God. I mean, when you let your mind go, numbness in your foot could be so many different things. It isn't necessarily something that a chiropractor can help. It could be something that only God can fix. And I think a lot of people understand that. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that He is in control. And my hope is in Him, not anybody else, not anything else, but it's in Him. I hope this is something that will just help you to think and get into Psalms chapter 42, read it through with chapter 43. Chapter 42 kind of breaks a section. When a lot of people look at Psalms in 5 sections, chapter 42 starts this second type of section that people would say. And so you see a lot of this kind of almost a redemption type, not theory, but it's a redemption type of, when it's all in that same way. And that's what's going on starting in chapter 42. So get into it. Put any comments on the YouTube. I'd appreciate it. Let me know what you think. Until next time.